evening. Our top story this week. The Massachusetts child protective industry starts snatching more kids in response to the media circus that has run loose over the last few weeks. And while CPS failures continue to mount, a Republican candidate for governor is demanding the resignation of the commissioner of the Department of Children and Families. 24 Massachusetts state reps jump on his bandwagon and call for her resignation as well. Governor Deval Patrick, however, is defending his girl, citing the difficult nature of the agency's work and saying that she's doing a terrific job, while she goes on the public relations offensive in a desperate attempt to save her job. Massachusetts state representatives also push to keep former criminals from becoming foster care providers, while the governor and other state officials downplay the concern over having foster parents with criminal records. Massachusetts Attorney General Martha Coakley is defending the governor's decision not to fire the commissioner and to allow criminals to be foster parents. Massachusetts also fails a young mother who went to them for help with her problem child who ended up shooting his little brother to death. Then a 23-month-old boy is killed while in his foster home in Yarmouth, Mass. The kid's real mother wants to know how he died, and is also now fighting even harder to get her daughter back from these murdering baby killers. And a Massachusetts social worker is punched in the face and robbed after doing a home visit in Fall River. In Florida this week, the child protective industry is celebrating the 3-year anniversary of the passing of a girl named Nubia Barahona who died at the hands of her adoptive parents. The Florida legislature is taking up child welfare reform after hearing from a range of experts about staff turnover and the high caseloads of CPS agents. And the Florida legislature also takes up the Pop-Tart bill that would protect kids from unnecessary zero-tolerance policies for doing normal kid things like brandishing a partially eating Pop-Tart into the shape of a weapon. In Minnesota, the child protective industry is facing penalties after cutting the number of kids in foster care because of the number of kids who re-enter the system a short time later. In New York, the child protective industry is trying to get it right despite all of the tragedies they've recently been responsible for. In Texas, a review of child deaths showed that the child protective industry is run by incompetent fools who fail to visit at-risk kids and then lie about it. A congressman from Washington puts forth a bill that would address the sex trafficking of foster kids and to locate runaways and determine if they had been victimized. In New Mexico, the child protective industry is facing a lawsuit alleging civil rights violations. And in Kentucky, the state is at risk of losing $9.2 million of federal money for not keeping up to snuff with their child welfare system. In India this week, the Human Rights Commission decides to put employees of an orphanage on notice for negligence after a girl had fallen off an official vehicle and was injured while going to school. Russia is trying the diplomatic approach to getting one of their orphans back from the USA after the kid's brother Maxim died in his adoptive home last year. In Scotland, the church is saying that the government's plan to provide a social worker for every child up to the age of 18 diminishes the family. And in Belgium, the government legalizes euthanasia for terminally ill children. In Canada, women are upset about the treatment of their children in the foster care system. In British Columbia, a baby is born to a lesbian couple and their male friend, and it is the first child in Canada to have 3 parents named on the birth certificate. In Australia, a single mother is ordered to pay for legal fees and paternity tests after accusing an ex-boyfriend of knocking her up and incorrectly naming him as the father on the birth certificate. In New South Wales, Australia, the child protective industry is stealing too many Aboriginal kids. And in England, an official government report found that training for social workers focuses too much on human rights theory and not enough on actually protecting the vulnerable in practice. In Illinois, a counselor is charged with having a sexual relationship with a 16-year-old ward of the state who he was counseling. In New Hampshire, a father who got screwed out of his kid gets 14 years in jail for threatening the judge. In Ohio, a CPS agent is charged with downloading and sharing child porn. In California, the director of a foster care agency is accused of embezzling $450,000 in foster care funds. And in Pennsylvania, a CPS agent is jailed and suspended after being caught in a bullet-riddled car that police believe was involved in a shootout. In California, the news tells the story of how police reached into their own pockets to help a homeless family with 5 kids find shelter on a cold and rainy night, only to have the child protective industry catch on and snatch their kids. In Indiana, a judge rules on behalf of CPS agents who wrongfully snatched a kid back in 2009 based on a false accusation. Then rules that CPS went too far by taking 5 kids from a mother who was having a hard time making ends meet. And in Maine, the child protective industry lets a mother who they accuse of abuse to keep her kids because they had no place else to go. In New York, a real mother takes off with her kid during a scheduled visit. In Oklahoma, 2 CPS agents are about to be fired for screwing up in a case where a 15-year-old special needs kid died after state officials failed to respond appropriately to complaints of neglect. In Pennsylvania, a teacher claims that he was wrongfully terminated for reporting child sex abuse suspicions. In Texas, a second couple comes forward saying that CPS agents tried to make them get divorced in order to get their kids back, even though it was only an argument that didn't put the kids into any danger. And finally, tonight in Utah, the state's planning on pulling the license of a controversial adoption agency after it had been prohibited from accepting new clients, but did so anyway. For these stories and all the latest dirt on the child protective industry, visit www.legallykidnapped.com. And until next week, this is Baby LK, over and out.